Session. I understand there was a request this morning, a couple of the senators received a call that there are peace officers at the judiciary who are owed overtime. The chief financial officer of judiciary is here. Mr. Chairman of Judiciary.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe you were going to invite them in, but just for the information of the body, and this is my understanding, is that the judiciary had not been paying overtime for a number of years. They've been giving CTE, and because of this situation, obviously, they would prefer the route of paying overtime to their law enforcement personnel, which includes marshals as well as probation officers. So if you would like to call in representatives to discuss the matter, then by all means, Mr. Chair.
Why don't we just go ahead and hear it, and then we'll decide as a body what we're going to do. Invite Mr. Badassi in, please.
Is it okay if Barbara Jean and Ann come in too? Oh, goodness.
Hey, it's snowing. Snowing on TV, and I'm not on my coat.
Why don't we go ahead and start? Why don't you have them sworn in, and then we'll proceed. We received a request to address overtime for the judiciary. Would one of you or some of you try to explain what this request is?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. On behalf of the Chief Justice and the Administrator of the Court and the employees, thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk about the compensatory time owed to the employees. On behalf of the Administrator, too, I'd like to apologize. He's in an all-day session interviewing applicants for the Justice Corps program, so he's not able to make it today. We did receive a request of whether or not we had any outstanding overtime owed, and so the way we handle overtime at the court is through compensatory time, and so we don't pay it out. The employees earn additional hours of overtime as accrued, almost like accrued leave, and then they're able to use it to take time off. And do you want to maybe explain a little more?
Thank you. As Mr. Badassi said, instead of overtime, any hours that's performed is instead of cash is given as time off. And we stream through that through a process. We determine a 40-hour work week. Anything in excess of 40 then becomes what we call compensatory time earned. And we try to work a schedule within the various divisions and sections so that these hours can be used. What is a critical component, though, is the employee must agree, and of course, we get that notice in the front end, meaning that if there is operations that have to go over the 40, that this employee is fully aware that the hours would be at comp time and they agree to work that. So that's been our application of the excess hours, but it's just the court's way of continuing critical services and providing that service to the community beyond the 40. So in lieu of cash, it's time off, paid time off.
Chairman Nugent.
Thank you very much folks, for your presentation today. And just for the record, Mr. Chairman, before I proceed and ask my question, if you could just identify yourself.
I'm sorry. Barbara Jean T. Paris, Human Resources Administrator, Judiciary of Guam.
And Christopher Budassi, Controller for Judiciary.
Ann Keith, Staff Attorney for Judiciary.
Although I know all three of you, it's just so that the public understands exactly what your capacity is. Mr. Chairman, I think that in this particular case, first and foremost, the law enforcement officials at the judiciary have been very, I would have to say, magnanimous in terms of continuing to work with this process and carry out their objectives and their missions with regards to the marshals as well as probation officers. In this case, we have legislation before us that would address overtime obligations, and now the opportunity or the possibility of allowing the marshals as well as the probation officers to receive actual payment in lieu of the CTO process that was being applied. It would just bring equity to the entire government. So I certainly appreciate the inquiry, I appreciate the request, and it's a very legitimate issue. Can we just go with the numbers now, Mr. Budassi, please, if you can just explain the time frame for the numbers that
Yeah,
you would
first I'd
like
like
to
to
address.
apologize. I don't have a time frame as far as the time earned. That's being worked on right now, so I'm hoping to have that information shortly. But the current balances for 244 employees at the judiciary of overtime owed at this point, or CTE, the value of the CTE that's owed is $420,985, and the majority of that rests with the Marshals Division, and the next highest amount is with probation. There's nominal, or not nominal, but much lesser amounts throughout the rest of the divisions at the court. Now the marshals have some challenges where they're accruing a lot of CTE at this point in time because of various issues. One issue, which is there's more criminal trials that are taking place. So a normal trial would have one marshal in the courtroom. Now what's happening when there's a criminal trial that's in place, there's a minimum of 4. So you have one for the courtroom, one for the jury, and then 2 for the defendant. And then even in more high-profile cases, like the DeSoto trial, there might be as many as 6 in the courtroom because you've got a lot of witnesses inside and outside the courtroom, and there might be some contention that needs to, crowd control. Now, where the CTE gets earned is we're pulling marshals off of serving warrants and documents, pulling them into the courtroom. They're serving in the courtroom throughout the day, but then those documents, they still have to be served, and so they're time sensitive. Afterward, they'll go out and serve those warrants, and that's where the CTE starts to pile up.
And can you also, I noticed that part of your initial numbers reflect positions other than marshals and probation. Although, albeit the figure is much less, can you also explain the requirement for CTE in that case?
Sure. Depending on the division and the projects before them, certain individuals may or may not accrue CTE. Like, for instance, in the financial management division, there was CTE accrued this year because we had, I think, 3 special payouts on payroll. We had the merit bonus, then we had the law enforcement, and then we had the CWA. And so those were all, and two of those were retroactive. And so aside from the regular duties of payroll and the day-to-day activities in FMD, we would have maybe a couple people working extra hours to make those payments happen. That would be one example.
I think the additional challenge, just looking forward, obviously you provided a figure of $420,000.
$420,000.
Okay, $420,000 to address the overtime obligation, or the CTO at this point in time, and the overtime obligation, which would allow the judiciary to also apply overtime. I think the follow-on question is, looking forward to fiscal year 15,
Right.
do you have the resources within your allocated budget for this FY to be able to address this obligation, or the anticipated obligation?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for that question. We didn't specifically budget for CTE or overtime in fiscal year 15, but we do have a plan, and we had a plan coming into the current budget cycle to address it. And some issues of that plan are we're trying to hire What's the title? Court security officers. So we had in our budget for court security officers, and those are a lower paid position, and they would handle the security at the main entrance and free up those more seasoned marshals to go out and serve warrants and do other things. So that was one area where we're trying to add in additional resources to free up that overtime accrual from the other marshals and at a lesser expense. And then also, we've seen already one, I believe, higher paid marshal who's retired, and we anticipate maybe a couple more. So for every marshal that retires that has 30 plus years, we can hire 2 or 3 other marshals to fill that spot, and that also is the plan to help address the issue.
So you're saying that at this point in time, your budget, based on your plan of action over the course of fiscal year 15, that you should be able to address any overtime obligations just for this fiscal year?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for providing the document to all of our colleagues. That reflects the various positions that will be affected. And not only did we get justification for the marshals and the probation officers, but also it highlighted some of the administrative clerks and why they are also due CTO at this time. So I appreciate the explanation. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
I saw the speaker's hand go up and Senator Yamashita. Anybody else wish to? Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You're saying here the total number of employees owed overtime is 244. What's your total number of employees?
Right now, I think, including all of our federally funded employees, it's about between 390 and 400.
So it's almost as if though then it's like almost everyone. How many marshals are there? So that's where the largest amount came from.
Is it 60?
Law enforcement personnel, Speaker, about maybe 55 to 60 law enforcement marshals, deputy marshals, because within this section, of course, there's other administrative.
And because you said earlier it was marshals and probation officers, with exception maybe of just recently with the financial management.
Right. Yeah, and if I may add to that, as you know, we magistrate on Saturdays. So when you magistrate, the extension would be the clerk's office, because there would have to be, clerks would have to come in on Saturdays to receive the filings, wait for the magistrate. So there's other divisions that support the courtroom function that would have to either work on additional days or wait for filings after 5. So other positions also.
So this overtime liability is as of October the 22nd, but how far back has this gone? Apparently your policy is comp time, and so how long has this been outstanding? And I'm sure that others have already started to take CTOs. So then how far back do these go?
We're currently putting that information together. It should be available hopefully within the hour. I really I can't answer it at this time because I'm just not sure. My guess is that it goes back quite a few years, and the marshals just haven't had the opportunity to use theirs over the last couple of years because of the increase in the number of trials. And then we also had some military deployments. And so when there's a lag between the military deployments and hiring an LTA to replace that person, then there's some CTE that gets accrued to try to make up for that as well.
Could the 244 could be same individuals? I mean, not 240 individual times for comp time, but it could be for about, I don't know, maybe 100 individuals, but one individual could have several CT already accrued?
No, the
This is
information in
actual
front of you
individuals.
are current balances of CTE owed to employees, and it's 244 individual employees that make up these numbers in front of you. Right.
Now, do you have, because when I was in the school system and we gave out CTs, there's a time frame in which they must be taken. And if you don't take it at that particular year or whatever the time frame is, then it's wiped clean. So you, in essence, what you're doing is that you're almost, mandating that they do take their time off. You don't want to have this keep transferring over year after year, and that's why I wanted to know how long has this been in the books. And so do you have that as part of your policy?
Yes, Speaker. In fact, we have a written policy that encourages that and actually sets some internal levels outside of the federal regulations on comp time balance. But our challenge is, trying to sift through the hours with an individual division. But our key objective also is to ensure operations. So we do have an encouragement as the hours are accumulated, they're also used, or a dialogue between the supervisor and the employee, and when do you anticipate to take this time? And that's a lot of work on the supervisor and the employee. So there is a policy, and we do encourage, and it's just a matter of scheduling and coordinating that with the daily operational needs. And as Chris said, a lot of times in marshals, particularly our military reservists are marshals, and so when we have those deployments, that's where the challenge are, because we're challenged with seasoned marshals that are on extended military leave. So they may have scheduled the time off, but because of a military deployment, they may have to reschedule. So it's a constant work, but it is encouraged, and we try our best as management to ensure that the hours are being used.
Now, you're saying that one way in which you're going to control this CTs or even paid overtime is to consider now hiring and having court security officers. So are you at all now starting to either announce for these positions, and do you have the money in your budget to actually then hire these individuals, and how many are you talking about?
As Mr. Badazzi said, that is our plan, is to augment the entrance, what we call the screening area, the main screening area, with court security officers. So what we're going to utilize are depth marshal recruits who will have the training but be specifically assigned to post entrances. And so that will help alleviate about 4 additional marshals that can be used for other more critical operations, either in field or security. So we're currently in the process of training those employees to be prepared to man the post and to facilitate monitoring of post 1.
So you have these individuals already on board then?
These were individuals that through to our internal employees that have made a career decision to pursue marshals, so they've taken the necessary qualifications, so we're ensuring we're training them. So we're trying to either see how that training component will work to assign them. But we are in the process of moving forward to shift those resources to post 1.
So there's not really going to be a big savings here at all, because if you're talking about entry-level individuals to be your security officers, then the salary won't be as high. But if you take those who are currently there now at other positions, but I want to make a career choice, they are at a certain level. So does that mean that salary where they're at is going to carry over and determine then now what the salary would be for these main entrance security level positions?
Speaker, there's 2 places where we're going to realize some savings. The first is current positions that were not part of the Marshals Division have been basically reallocated to the Marshals Division. And so these are positions that were in other divisions. The administrator looked at the human resources needs for each division and was able to reallocate, I think, how many? 4 positions to move into the marshal. So that was the immediate steps that were taken to try to help alleviate this process. So those are the debt marshal recruits that Barbara Jean is talking about. And then the savings occurs when those new recruit marshals and then eventually the court security officers, when they're hired, the savings come from the CTE not being accrued and having to be paid. So we're going to free up the marshals that are currently doing the court security, and then also free up some other marshals to not have to go into the courtroom because we've got these additional resources as part of the marshals division.
So have you quantified what those savings are?
Not specifically,
I mean,
but it
well-
should be it's the cost avoidance of the CTE
Yeah.
accrual.
But, and of course, you want to be able to quantify that because you don't want to be, have to pay out $420,000, every year or every 2 years or whatever that amount is.
Correct.
That's the whole purpose, of doing just that. Now, how do you determine? I know this is more procedural on your part, but is it on a volunteer basis for those who would be then doing these extra time, or is there, a selection? How is it? Because, you can always have your top person with the highest salary, of course, volunteer to do this, and then the cost, of course, would be higher to the courts versus maybe even mid-level or entry-level. I don't know. Those are just some of the controls you would think that, be part of your procedures.
Speaker, I think the assignment, or I think it's based on the operations or the need, and also I know particularly because security is a very important aspect at the court. It's based on also their credentials and their training. So particularly, it may be a more seasoned marshal, but then it's needed because of their training and their institutional knowledge. So it just depends on the operation and the critical need of the service. So those are some of the decisions that the marshal of the court or probation would have to examine.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. Welcome to your legislature. So the first question that Madam Speaker asked was actually my question about the time, because I figure if you came up with the amount, there had to be a way to ballpark the time. And Chris, I heard you saying that it may be a couple years, right? So,
Yes, it could be.
okay. And so I'm sorry.
We'll be
go
able
ahead.
to have that information for you, hopefully before the end of the day.
And so at least for a couple of years, the court employees have been satisfied with the CTE response to their overtime. And as Madam Speaker spoke, when I was at DOE, we internally used CTE because that was, what worked. We never had the money for it, but it worked out. So essentially then, the employees are satisfied with that.
They certainly volunteer to do the extra overtime work, so they've agreed to do it in return for the CTE.
Okay.
So whether they're satisfied or not, you would have to. We know that they would prefer to get paid, as opposed to having the bank of the CTE. The majority of them.
Okay. I was looking at this list. Office of the Ethics Prosecutor. I'm trying, what is that?
That's under Senator, under Supreme Court. That's our ethics prosecutor, Mr. Bruce Bradley.
But, well, he has a lot of overtime. So, what is there? A lot of ethics issues that are being addressed? And I'm really trying to understand what, after the marshals and probation, it's this person. Oh, it's for one person.
No, well, that's the the Office of the Ethics consists of, he has 2 additional staff.
So there's a lot of ethics cases. Is that what that means? Or is that an unfair question? I don't want to pose any unfair questions, but I'm trying. What do we?
Right. Ethics cases are confidential by nature, and so even we down at the Superior Court do not know the nature of. We don't know Yeah, that's something that only the Supreme Court knows. The Supreme Court governs attorneys, and as such, they also govern the ethics of attorneys. So this is answerable to the Supreme Court.
So this is about attorneys. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Senator Nicholas, you had your hand up. Anybody else wish to? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Morrison right afterwards. Okay.
Was Senator Morrison before me? I'll yield.
Go ahead. All right, somebody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I just want to know or learn how, there's certain fees. I've been bringing this up throughout this whole overtime process. And there's certain fees, of course, are schedules that are established by the court. And I'm sure they are to offset certain administrative costs going into these processes. But again, I've asked this throughout every agency that came here with the overtime. Is any of those fees attached to potential overtime? You have your.
I believe the serving of documents is one that's directly correlated to it. So when when marshals get grounded, who are supposed to be serving documents to go serve in the courtrooms, and then later on they have to go out after hours to serve those documents, then they're accruing the CTE as a direct result of having to do that work.
With these, a lot of these overtime also accrue with these cases that kind of go on beyond the normal working hours, right? And I'm just wondering if, given that you know that's coming, is with these fees that are built in, are those factored in if you know that it's going to go beyond the threshold of a normal working hours, so that way you know that these fees are covered? These fees cover overtime and it does not impact your operational budget?
I don't think there's been any specific effort to build in any costs of the overtime into the fees. I'd have to go back and speak to our deputy administrator, who was in charge of the process of increasing the fees at the court for the last several years, and try to figure out what his methodology was for those specific fees as to what went into determining what the cost should be. But I'm guessing that it did not include any factor of the CTE overtime that's being accrued, because it's really been it's been unanticipated because of the high number of criminal trials that have been happening over the last year and a half. So it wasn't something that we necessarily could have planned for. We just saw a really sharp rise in the number of trials. So at any given time, we might have 4 criminal trials going at once, whereas the year before there might have been 1 trial a week. And so that's been the challenge, has been trying to one, determine what's happening and how to best come up with a solution to mitigate the compensatory time accrual.
When I brought this up with the GPD, I'm sure you guys have different missions and objectives and functions, but I know at the end, overtime is gonna, you look at the past budgets or past cycles. This has been a cycle of coming down here and addressing overtime, and I'm just trying to look into this area of these fee structures that are built into these agencies. I'm not to eliminate overtime, but there has to be, like with GPD, they just established their fee structure this year, and a lot of that too factors in to some degree their overtime assets. So they don't eat into that function. And I'm seeing here, of course, you have areas not necessarily a marshal probation, but you have administrative services here, and I know there has to be some anticipation that when you have your fee structure. When was the last time you adjusted your fee structure?
I believe the fourth and final increase was last January. So there was a series of 4 increases that occurred starting in 2009 or 2010 every January. So the first increment was 25%, second was, I think it was 20, 25, 25, and 50. Maybe there was three increases within the last 3 years. So that was what I was referring to in the what went behind coming up with those actual fees. I'd have to check with the deputy administrator who worked on that project.
Okay. Well, I understand, Mr. Chair, we have to deal with what's in front of us, but I'm just trying to look forward and seeing if these could be a solution in the future when you adjust your fee schedule to minimizing the impact of overtime. Sure. And again, with fire, and they've been eating into their certain flaming fund, but of course they need to look at their whole overall fee structure, because of some of the service that are performed that are not necessarily involved directly with the mission, but some services out there that they provide that they are working to factor in net potential overtime. So I hope when this could be noted, and going forward, if you're looking to the next year around the corner, or possible 3 years from now, adjusting, because you just adjusted your schedule, that would be something to look into. And I certainly like to be involved if there's anything. I think I have some ideas if looking at other agencies that I worked with fee structures, but I know it's a certain specific function there, but maybe you could guide us in where that can fit in, anticipating there is going to be overtime, and with these types of filing fees, or I'm sure there's also, you have to deal with the impact of COFA, and a lot of that is, I believe, like a waiver of fees, right? Waiving, there's a lot of waiving, so I'm sure there's ways to possibly seek reimbursement for those services, COFA, that factor in overtime. So I hope that we can work together and see if this is an area that can minimize the impact of overtime. And again, I'm bringing this up throughout agencies that really accrue a lot of heavy overtime. I know this not in large part compared to the other agencies, but I just wanted to address that with you.
Thank you, Senator. I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think there's definitely opportunities that we can look at to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. Overtime has to be approved, right? That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So overtime is typically only approved when the demands of the operation exceed what is able to be accomplished in the normal course of business, right? Okay. So, you know, the conversation of raising people's fees to pay for overtime kind of really concerns me. I really don't like the idea of increasing people's fees, because the fee for service should be commensurate to the ability to accomplish that work within the standard time. So if we're going to be paying overtime, we shouldn't be building a higher fee because we wanted to pay for overtime, because overtime should be an exception to the standard, not the standard. And the fee should only be applied to the standard normal course of business. So I'm not a big fan of the idea of raising fees for our people. If it's in the nature of the normal course of business for our people, then absolutely. But if it's to compensate for overtime, I think we're treating the symptom and not the illness. So on the issue of overtime, you guys mentioned already that there is an unusual load for the marshals in particular this year. Do we have a shortage of marshals on a standardized basis, or are we pretty good on the number of marshals that we need in the judiciary?
Can you answer this one?
Senator, I think overall, to answer the question, I think we can certainly do more with more personnel. I think the court does its best to try to ensure, particularly in the courtroom, security is first and paramount. So with security, certainly you can do more and use of other technology. But I think in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, yes, we certainly can use the increase in marshals, but we're also cognizant of the fiscal responsibility. But our strategy is always to maximize the human resources and get the best return on the benefit and provide a competent service, but also, we always want to find ways to improve or enhance our delivery of services. So
Sure.
overall, I think there's certainly other things we'd like to do and add more, but we certainly will do the best with the resources that's given to us.
And just to add, I think the current trend is that would tell us that we need more marshals to try to mitigate some of the overtime. But I don't think that we've seen this trend long enough to actually go all in and say, okay, yeah, we need an extra 15 marshals. And so, we've taken the immediate step of adding in these 4 deputy recruits from within our existing personnel footprint, taking from these divisions and shifting into the marshals to try to not to necessarily increase our number of FTEs without having doing the research, as the speaker had mentioned, figuring out why this is happening and is it going to continue.
Okay. Yeah, because I look at the marshal number and it's 241,000, and so of course we don't have marshals that make 241,000. So this is definitely more than what it would cost to even hire an additional marshal. So I trust you guys are able to look at the metrics and figure out if you need to balance it with more hiring to offset some of the overtime costs. But again, also too, this is accrued over a period more than last fiscal year, or is this just last fiscal year?
We're not sure. I'm waiting for the information from my team at the office, and I should be able to give that to you before the end of today.
Okay, because that would also kind of be telling on what the real year-over-year picture is, and then how that compares to what what you have set aside for your budget for the overtime situation in 2015. One of the things that we've been pretty consistent with in asking each of the different public safety agencies that have come to us today regarding this issue is, yes, we need to take care of whatever's outstanding for prior year, but what does that mean for this coming fiscal year? Because we don't want people to be waiting either. And the suggestion that employees like certified time off, I don't think so. I think everybody would like to get their paycheck. I mean, you put in the time, you want to get the pay. And one of the things that was running through my head when we were talking about the certified time off is, you guys credit it at time and a half, right?
That's
now,
correct.
So that would be 1.5 for
Yes.
everyone.
Yes.
But now, if you were to get paid overtime, you would also get retirement and Medicare. So really, it should be like 1.525, right? Because we're not crediting the benefit. Because technically, overtime on the wage issue is just time and a half.
Right.
But when we talk about wages and benefits, we're not crediting that on the CTO.
Correct, because those are costs incurred by the court. So we're paying that in addition to the wages, the hourly wages. So we're going to pay 29.85% for every dollar that we send over that the employee earns and we pay out.
Yeah.
So.
No, but that employee, if they did get paid, assuming that their non-base pay was included in their retirement calculation, they would have gotten a 5% government contribution to their retirement if they were actually compensated for that overtime. But because they're only getting CTO, they're only getting time and a half credited, and they're losing that 5%. So really, I mean, I think that this speaks to the greater, Mr. Chairman, the greater question of CTO government-wide. Are we crediting it at a true rate of compensation, factoring the benefits that the employees are supposed to be getting, inclusive also of the insurance and the Medicare contribution? Because if employees are taking CTO at time and a half, but it's really supposed to be time and a half plus a fraction, accrued over so many years, our employees could really be losing out on a significant amount of compensation that should have been due them. So I think this underscores the point that we should not be encouraging CTO as a standard practice, and we really need to get our government to the point where we're paying overtime as an actual wage-based compensation, so that it's reflected not only in the salaries and the paychecks of the employees, but in the benefits that they're entitled to and the matching contributions that they're supposed to be getting to the retirement fund. So I just wanted to clarify that, and thank you guys for participating, and thank you so much to the court also for reaching out to us, because as the bill was introduced, we would not have been aware, just off the bat, that there was this outstanding $420,000 due to our marshals and these other 244 employees. So again, this whole exercise is to try and make everybody whole so we can go forward on a clean slate. And I thank you guys very much for participating.
Thank you, Senator. Any other senator wish to be heard? Senator Tony Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I was wondering if we'd be able to get a breakdown of the listing as to positions that these are, like marshals, are these marshals 1, 2, or supervisors, things like that, and what they're owed. And then also just to follow up on the previous speaker's comment on CTO and how far back this goes. Actually, just for the past fiscal year, probably for 2014, what was the amount owed? And also, what is the court's policy for CTO? How far back do they go? Whether it has to be used, use it or lose it, and things like that, just so that we can get an idea on what their policies are.
Can we make a copy of that policy? We have the policy here. We can make a copy and
Okay,
have it
that'd be
distributed.
great. Yeah, thank you.
And then the other things we'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other senator wish to be heard? If not, Chairman Egan.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've already generated sufficient discussion and responses in regards to the issue that we have at hand. And if the only pending, in addition to the information that has been requested, is the actual timelines associated with some of these outstanding overtime payments, I think that would be very critical in terms of moving forward and understanding exactly what we're working with. But thank you very much. I appreciate the comments that were made a little earlier that there's a plan of action in terms of being able to try to minimize any overtime pay or accumulation or obligation in fiscal year 15 by virtue of identifying other approaches in terms of reducing this particular obligation. So thank you very much, and we look forward to further deliberation on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, great. Then we'll thank our visitors, and I see the majority leader grab the microphone wanting my attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Chair. Ms. Chair, I join the sentiments of our colleagues where we thank the judiciary for their participation this afternoon. Thank you. We've accommodated 2 legislative committees so far by way of public hearings that they've had during this session. Tomorrow morning I have an oversight hearing with the Guam Election Commission at 10 a.m. So if I can ask the indulgence of the body to allow me to continue that very important hearing, because we're going to discuss matters surrounding the primary election and the procedures that they have for the general election to guarantee free and fair elections, but more importantly to ask what can the legislature further do to assist to achieve those ends. And so at this time I'm open for any suggestions on when we can come in tomorrow, as long as I have an opportunity to have my hearing that begins at 10 a.m.
I think some of them are asking, why don't we just continue?
Now, I thought some had to go to, I was going to make a motion to recess till tomorrow because of,
All right, let's just take a short recess so we can figure out where we're going. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that after reaching consensus to what time we should come back tomorrow, I move that we recess to 1 p.m.
Any objection?